"You don't belong up here. People like you never do." He said it loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. Then he grabbed the elderly woman's wrist, yanked her boarding pass right out of her hand, and threw it onto the floor like it was trash. 72 years old, alone, and every single adult in that cabin dropped their eyes. Everyone. Newspapers went up, headphones went in, nobody moved, nobody breathed, until a 10-year-old girl in a yellow cardigan pushed past her nanny, planted both feet in the aisle, looked the man dead in the face and said, "Pick it up right now and then get out of her seat." If you love stories about courage that will restore your faith in humanity, please subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see just how far this story travels. Now, let's get into the story. The morning had started the way most big mornings do for a 10-year-old with too much energy and not enough patience. Layla Bennett had been up early. She had laid out her outfit the night before. Yellow cardigan, white sneakers, her favorite jeans with the little embroidered flowers along the pockets. She had packed and repacked her backpack twice. She had eaten half a bowl of cereal before pushing it aside because her stomach was doing flips. "You're going to make yourself sick before we even get to the airport," said Rosalind, her nanny, sipping coffee at the kitchen counter with the calm of someone who had seen this particular flavor of excitement many times before. "I'm not nervous," Layla insisted. "I'm excited. There's a difference." "There is," Rosalind agreed. "The difference is the cereal bowl." Layla grinned and grabbed a banana instead. She had been waiting for this trip her entire life, or at least for what felt like forever when you were 10. Her grandmother, Nana Pearl, lived in Atlanta. Layla lived in Chicago. And for the first time, instead of flying coach with her knees pressed against the seat in front of her and a stranger's elbow edging into her space, Layla's mother had splurged on first-class tickets, a birthday gift, a big one. Layla would be celebrating her birthday in Atlanta, surrounded by cousins and aunts and the smell of Nana Pearl's sweet potato pie, and she was going to get there in style. That was the plan. Rosalind drove them to O'Hare with plenty of time to spare. Layla pressed her forehead against the passenger window the whole way, watching the city give way to highway, the highway give way to airport signs. She whispered the gate number to herself like a prayer. Gate B14, first class, seat 3A, seat 3A. She had memorized it. Security was the usual slow shuffle, shoes off, laptop out, the full ritual. Layla moved through it with practiced patience. She had flown before, just never like this. Never with the kind of boarding pass that let you walk down a different line. Never with the kind of ticket that had the words printed big and bold across the top. First class. She held that boarding pass the whole walk to the gate. Rosalind offered to put it in her bag for safekeeping, and Layla looked at her like she had suggested throwing it out a window. "I'll hold it," Layla said. "Okay," Rosalind said, smiling. At the gate, Layla sat in one of the hard plastic chairs and watched the plane through the tall windows. It was bigger than she expected. The morning light was cutting across the tarmac in long golden stripes, and she thought privately that it looked like something from a movie. She pulled out her little notebook, the one with the sunflower cover, and started writing down everything she was noticing. The way the gate agent's voice echoed, the family with the twin toddlers 2 rows over, the old man reading an actual physical newspaper folded in quarters the old-fashioned way. And then she noticed the woman. She was seated across the waiting area, maybe 20 feet away, elderly, black, with a beautiful silver-gray natural that framed her face like a crown. She was dressed carefully, the way older women sometimes dress when they want to look their best. A deep plum blazer, pearl earrings, a small, rolling carry-on beside her feet. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching the gate with a quiet, composed expression. There was something about her that caught Layla's attention and held it. A kind of stillness, like she had been places, like she had seen things. Layla wrote in her notebook, "Old lady across the gate looks like someone important." Then boarding was called. They called first class and premium passengers first, which meant Layla and Rosalind were among the first group. Layla walked down the jetway with her boarding pass gripped in both hands, her backpack bouncing with every step. She could feel her heart picking up pace as she stepped through the door of the plane. The flight attendant greeted them with a smile. The first-class cabin stretched out ahead of her. Wide seats, real space, small screens at every seat. She had never seen anything like it up close. "Row 3, Rosalind murmured, guiding her gently with a hand on her shoulder. Layla walked forward, counting seats, and then she stopped because seat 3A was not empty. There was a woman in it, an elderly woman, and for just a half second, Layla didn't understand until she looked closer and recognized the plum blazer, the pearl earrings, the silver crown of natural hair. It was the woman from the gate. She was already seated, hands folded calmly in her lap, her small rolling carry-on stored above. She looked settled, peaceful almost. Layla looked at her boarding pass, 3A. She looked at the seat, 3A. She looked at Rosalind. "Maybe she has the same seat," Layla whispered. "That doesn't happen," Rosalind said quietly. "Let me handle it." "Okay." But before Rosalind could take another step, something else happened. A man pushed past them from behind. Not rudely enough to knock anyone over, but rudely enough. He was broad-shouldered, somewhere in his mid-50s, dressed in the kind of business casual that said he thought of himself as important. Button-down shirt, khakis, a rolling bag that was definitely larger than the carry-on guidelines allowed. He moved with the particular energy of someone who had decided the aisle belonged to him. He stopped at row 3. He looked at the woman in 3A, and then he dropped his oversized bag directly onto her lap. Not placed it, dropped it. The heavy canvas duffel landed with a thud across her knees, and the woman let out a small, startled sound and grabbed the armrest to steady herself. "You're in my seat, Grandma," the man said. "Move." The cabin went very quiet. Layla felt the air change. She was close enough to see the woman's face, the flash of shock, the quick blink, the way she reached down and lifted the bag off her own lap with trembling hands and set it carefully aside, like she was trying to give him no reason to escalate. "I have boarding pass," the woman said. Her voice was soft but clear. She had a slight accent, Caribbean maybe, and her words were careful. "I am in my assigned seat." "I don't care what your pass says," the man replied. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't seem the slightest bit concerned about who was watching. "This is 3A. That's my seat. You need to move." "Sir," Rosalind started. "Not talking to you," he said without even looking at her. Layla stood very still. There was something happening in her chest, something that was not quite fear and not quite anger, but was made of both. She could feel it moving up from her stomach into her throat. She looked at the woman in the seat. The woman was holding her boarding pass now, clutching it with both hands, not showing it to him, just holding it like she was deciding something. Then the man reached over and grabbed the woman's small carry-on handle. "I'll put this back in coach for you," he said, already pulling. "Stop." The word came out of Layla's mouth before she had made a decision to say it, clear, sharp, and surprisingly loud. In the quiet cabin, the man paused. He turned and looked at her, and the look on his face said everything. It said, "Who is this child, and why is she speaking to me?" "Excuse me," he said. Layla's hands were shaking. She could feel them, but her voice when she spoke again was steady. "That's her bag. You don't touch someone's bag without asking." A beat of silence. "Kid," the man said slowly, the way some adults talk to children when they want to remind them of the full weight of the distance between their ages. "Stay out of this." "She has a boarding pass," Layla said. "You can see it in her hand." Rosalind put a gentle hand on Layla's shoulder. "Layla, I also have a boarding pass," Layla continued, and she lifted her own boarding pass and held it up for seat 3A, which means one of us has the wrong seat, and it's not her, and it's not me. The man stared at the boarding pass, then at Layla. Then he made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a scoff. "They put a kid in first class," he said to no one in particular. "Great." "They put a child who bought a first-class ticket in first class," Rosalind said. Her voice had shifted too. The gentle, patient quality was still there, but something underneath it had gone firm. "And they seated that woman, who also has a first-class ticket, in her assigned seat. So, I'm going to need you to check your boarding pass, sir, because I think you're confused about which seat belongs to you." The man's jaw tightened. He pulled out his boarding pass and looked at it, and for one brief moment, Layla thought it was over. She thought he would read the seat number, realize his mistake, and move. People made mistakes. Seats got mixed up. It happened. But then something shifted in his expression. Not embarrassment, something harder than that. Something that had decided it wasn't going to back down in front of a child and an older woman and a nanny. Not in front of all these people watching. 3A, he said, and he held up his boarding pass. Rosalind leaned in slightly. That says 13A, sir. Another silence, longer this time. It does say 13A, said a man across the aisle. He was maybe 40 in a gray suit, and he said it quietly, almost carefully, like he was just offering a fact. The woman in the plum blazer had not moved. She sat with perfect posture, her boarding pass still held in both hands, her eyes fixed on the middle distance. She was not looking at the man. She was not looking at Layla. She was somewhere else entirely, wrapped in a composure that must have taken a lifetime to build. The man's face went through several things at once. His jaw worked. His eyes moved to his boarding pass again, then to the seat number on the headrest, then to Layla, who was still standing in the aisle with her yellow cardigan and her small, determined face, and her boarding pass held up in one hand. "These seats look the same," he muttered. "They're numbered," Layla said. "That's how airplanes work." Someone behind her made a short sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. The man's eyes cut to her. "Watch your mouth, little girl." "She's being respectful," Rosalind said. And now the patience was entirely gone, which is more than I can say for the way you just dropped your bag on a 70-some-year-old woman and told her to move. The man opened his mouth. Then he closed it. Then a flight attendant appeared from the front of the cabin, and Layla felt a complicated rush of relief and nervousness, because flight attendants could fix this, right? Flight attendants were supposed to fix things like this. Her name tag said Ava. She was young, maybe 25, with a practiced smile and the slightly tense energy of someone who had been trained to de-escalate without taking sides. "Is there a seating issue?" she asked. "Yes," Rosalind said. "This gentleman is in the wrong seat." "This seat is mine," the man said at exactly the same moment. Ava's smile stayed in place. She looked at the man first, then at the woman in the seat, then at Layla, and Layla could see her doing the math, the visible calculation of who was the more manageable conflict. "Sir," Ava said, turning to the man, "can I see your boarding pass?" He handed it to her. She looked at it, then she looked at the headrest numbers, then she handed it back. "You're in 13A, sir," she said. "Row 13 on the left." The man exhaled through his nose. "Fine," he said, and the word came out like a rock being dropped. He yanked his duffel from where he'd set it on the armrest. He looked at the woman in 3A without apology, without acknowledgement, without any expression at all. And then he looked at Layla. "You have a real attitude problem," he said. "She has a boarding pass," Layla said, "just like everybody else." The man walked back toward row 13 without another word. Layla let out a long, slow breath. Her legs felt slightly unsteady. Rosalind squeezed her shoulder, and Layla looked up at her, and Rosalind gave her a small, careful nod, the kind that said, "I see you. You did good. We'll talk about this later." Layla turned to the woman in seat 3A. "Are you okay?" she asked. The woman looked at her for the first time, and the expression on her face was something Layla didn't entirely have words for. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something older and quieter than gratitude, something that lived behind the eyes. "I am okay, sweetheart," the woman said. "Thank you." "He shouldn't have touched your bag," Layla said. "No," the woman agreed. "He should not have." Layla took her seat 3B right next to the window. Rosalind settled into 3C across the aisle. The boarding continued around them. Passengers filed past, stowing bags, settling in. The ordinary business of a flight coming together. But the ordinary feeling was gone. Something had happened, and the people who'd witnessed it were still carrying it. Layla could feel it in the way the man in the gray suit across the aisle glanced at her and then looked quickly away. She could feel it in the small silence that seemed to have settled over the front of the cabin like a low cloud. She pulled out her sunflower notebook. She wrote, "His boarding pass said 13A. He knew. Or he should have known." She stared at those words. She wrote underneath them, "Why did he do it anyway?" Her pen hovered over the page. The question felt bigger than the answer. She had seen enough of the world even at 10 to have a theory. But theories were uncomfortable things. They required you to sit with the discomfort of knowing something you hadn't been told directly, something that lived in the space between what people said and what they actually meant. The woman in 3A had not argued loudly, had not demanded, had not escalated. She had simply held her boarding pass and waited with the patience of someone who had learned that patience was sometimes the only armor available, and the man had dropped his bag on her lap anyway. Layla closed her notebook. The plane had reached full capacity. The flight attendants were doing their final checks. Ava moved through the first-class cabin with practiced efficiency, checking overhead bins, making sure trays were stowed, and then from somewhere behind them, row 13, the sound of a voice, low at first, then rising. "I don't see why she gets to stay." "Up there," the man was saying. He wasn't talking to anyone in particular, which was somehow worse than if he had been. He was saying it in the way some people say things when they want to be overheard. First class is first class. You'd think they'd screen passengers better. The man in the gray suit across the aisle shifted in his seat. The woman in 3A did not turn around. Layla turned around. She could see him clearly from her seat 3 rows back, already large in the smaller space of the coach-adjacent rows, his arms crossed, his jaw set in an expression that was equal parts resentment and performance. The man next to him, a younger guy with headphones, had pulled the headphones down slightly and was looking out the window in the pointed way of someone who wanted no part of anything happening around him. "Do you need something?" Layla called back. The cabin, which had been settling into the low hum of pre-departure, went still. The man stared at her. "Layla," Rosalind said quietly. "He said something," Layla said without breaking eye contact with the man. "I'm asking if he needs something." The man's mouth opened, then it closed. He looked at the child looking back at him, and something happened in his face. A brief, visible moment where he realized that she was not going to look away. And he was the one who would have to. He looked away. Ava appeared at Layla's elbow. "Sweetheart, let's just—" She wasn't bothering anyone, Layla said, turning back around. She addressed Ava directly now, quietly, the way she had heard her mother talk when her mother wanted to make sure a point was received rather than just heard. She got on the plane, she sat in her seat, and he dropped his bag on her. And he's still saying things. Ava's smile remained in place, but something behind her eyes shifted slightly. "I'll speak to him," she said. "Thank you," Layla said. Rosalind put a hand over Layla's, and Layla felt the small, warm pressure of it and let herself relax by about half a degree. The woman in 3A turned her head slightly, not fully toward Layla, but enough. "You're a brave child," she said softly. "I'm not that brave," Layla said honestly. "My hands were shaking the whole time." The woman turned fully now, and for the first time she smiled. It was a slow smile, a deep one, the kind that rearranged a face. "That," she said, "is what brave is." Layla thought about that. She wrote it in her notebook. The plane began to push back from the gate. Outside the window, O'Hare moved past in slow reverse, the terminal sliding away, the tarmac opening up ahead. The morning light was still doing its long golden thing across the pavement, and Layla watched it while she listened to the safety announcement and tried to let her heartbeat return to something normal. It was almost back to normal when the voice came again. Loud this time. No pretense of being overheard by accident. "I'm telling you, this whole flight is going to be a problem. I can already tell. Row 13. The man." And this time he was looking directly at the back of the woman in 3A's head when he said it. Layla's hands balled into fists in her lap. Rosalind saw it. "Don't." She said. "He's doing it on purpose," Layla said. "I know. Someone should say something." "Someone did," Rosalind said. "You did. And it mattered. It didn't stop him." Rosalind was quiet for a moment. The plane continued its slow taxi toward the runway. The safety video was playing on the small screens, the cheerful illustrated figures demonstrating oxygen masks and flotation devices with cartoon calm. "Baby," Rosalind said, and her voice had gone gentle in a different way now, the way it went when she was about to say something that she knew would land heavy. Sometimes it doesn't stop right away. Sometimes it takes more than one person speaking up. And sometimes the people who need to speak up the most are the ones staying quiet. Layla looked around the cabin. The man in the gray suit across the aisle was staring very intently at his phone. The woman 2 rows up had put in earbuds. The couple near the front were whispering to each other with the careful body language of people who had decided not to get involved. She looked at the woman in 3A who was sitting with her hands folded again, her gaze forward, her expression perfectly still. And Layla thought, she's been doing this longer than I've been alive. This specific thing, sitting in a space and having someone try to take it from her, sitting still and holding her boarding pass and waiting for someone to do the right thing. She thought, how many times? She wrote in her notebook, how many times did nobody speak up? The plane reached the runway. The engines began to build. And from row 13, just barely audible under the rising engine noise, the man said something else, something shorter, 2 words. And even with the engines and the distance, Layla heard them. She closed her notebook. She looked at Rosalind, and Rosalind, who had also heard, closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then opened them and pressed the call button above her seat. Rosalind's finger came off the call button the moment Ava reappeared at the front of the cabin, already walking fast, already wearing the expression of someone who had been watching from a distance and had waited 1 beat too long to intervene. She stopped at Rosalind's row and leaned in close, her voice low and controlled. "I heard it," Rosalind said before Ava could speak. "And so did half this cabin." Ava glanced back toward row 13. The man had his arms crossed and his chin tilted up slightly, which was the posture of someone who had decided the best defense was to act like nothing had happened at all. The young man beside him had his headphones fully on now, eyes forward, body language screaming that he had chosen total and complete non-involvement. "I'll speak to him again," Ava said. "You'll need to do more than speak," Rosalind said. "What he just said crosses a line." "You know what line I'm talking about." Ava's jaw worked slightly. "I understand your concern." "My concern," Rosalind said, and she said the word carefully, like she was picking it up and examining it, "is that a 72-year-old woman is sitting 3 feet away from the man who just grabbed her wrist hard enough to make her drop her boarding pass. And you're telling me you'll speak to him again?" Silence. Ava straightened slightly. "Ma'am, You saw the wrist grab?" Rosalind said. "I saw you see it." Another silence, different in texture, the kind that meant something had landed. Layla was watching all of this from her seat, very still, her sunflower notebook open in her lap, but the pen not moving. She was watching Rosalind the way you watch someone you love do something you didn't know they were capable of, with a kind of fierce and quiet pride that filled up the chest. The woman in 3A was also watching. She had turned slightly in her seat, and her expression had shifted from that composed stillness into something more attentive, like she was waiting to see which direction this wind was going to blow. "I'll get the senior flight attendant," Ava said finally. "Thank you," Rosalind said. Ava walked back toward the galley at the front of the plane. The cabin settled back into its pre-departure sounds, the hum of the engines cycling through their checks, the click of seatbelts, the soft percussion of overhead bins being opened and closed. But the quality of that sound had changed. It had a layer of attention underneath it now, the kind that meant people were listening, even when they were pretending not to. The man in the gray suit across the aisle from Layla glanced over. He was maybe 42, 43. He had a kind face when he wasn't working at looking neutral, which was what he had been doing for the last few minutes. "Your nanny is right," he said quietly enough that it was just for Layla. Layla looked at him. "I know," she said. He nodded once and went back to his phone, but he had put it face down on his tray, and his posture had changed. He was leaning forward slightly now, the way people lean when they've made a decision they haven't announced yet. From the galley, voices low, urgent. Ava's and someone else's older. A woman's voice with a firmness that carried even without the words being audible. Layla wrote in her notebook that Rosalind pressed the button. Ava is getting someone senior. She stared at the note. Then from row 13, loud enough to reach the front of the cabin without any effort at all, the man said, I don't know why this is taking so long. It's a seating issue. This happens all the time. This is not a seating issue, the woman in 3A said. Everyone heard it. The woman had not raised her voice. She had not turned around. She had simply set it into the air in front of her with the clean precision of a statement that had been waiting its entire life to be made. The cabin went very quiet. Layla felt the hair on her arms stand up. Excuse me, the man said from row 13. Now the woman turned slow, deliberate, all the way around in her seat so that she was looking directly at the man 3 rows back. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her chin was level. Her eyes were steady. You did not confuse your seat, she said. 13. A and 3A do not look alike on a boarding pass. You saw a woman sitting alone in first class, and you decided she did not belong there. That is not a seating issue. The man's face went through a fast series of expressions. Surprise, then irritation, then something that was trying very hard to look like indignation. Lady, I don't know what you're implying. I am not implying anything, she said. I am saying it directly because I am 72 years old, and I have been implying things for long enough. Dead silence. Then from somewhere in the middle of the first-class cabin, a sound. A single short, involuntary exhale of breath. Not quite a laugh. More like the sound a room makes when the temperature changes. The man in the gray suit put both hands flat on his tray table. The man from row 13 leaned forward. His voice had dropped, which was somehow more threatening than when it had been loud. You need to watch how you talk to people. You need to watch how you touch people, Rosalind said. Nobody asked you. Nobody asked you to grab her wrist, Rosalind said. And yet, another passenger, a woman in her 60s near the front, turned around in her seat. She hadn't said anything until now. She had the kind of face that suggested she had been raised to stay out of other people's business, but she was looking at the man from row 13 with an expression that was losing patience with staying polite. Young man, she said, and the word young landed with a particular kind of weight that only older women can deploy. I think you should sit down and stop talking. The man opened his mouth. Sit down, she said again. Simpler this time. He sat, not because he wanted to, because the arithmetic of the room had shifted and he could feel it. And whatever instinct had been fueling his performance since he boarded was running into the wall of a cabin that was no longer looking away. Layla let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Then 2 things happened at the same time. The senior flight attendant came out of the galley and the plane stopped moving. Not the gradual slowing of a taxi pause, a full stop, engines dropping back, the kind of stop that makes passengers look up from their phones. Ladies and gentlemen, came the captain's voice over the intercom, smooth and professional. We're going to hold here for a few minutes. There's some congestion on the taxiway ahead. We'll have an updated departure time for you shortly. Layla looked at Rosalind. Rosalind looked back at her. The timing felt significant, though Layla couldn't have said exactly why, like the plane itself had decided to give them more time. The senior flight attendant was named Gloria. Her name tag said so, and so did the way she walked, like someone who had 30 years of other people's bad days behind her, and wasn't intimidated by another one. She was 60-some, black, with close-cropped natural hair going silver at the temples. She came up the aisle with a calm that somehow took up more space than urgency would have. She stopped at row 3. She looked at the woman in 3A. Ma'am, are you all right? I am well, thank you, the woman said. My name is Beatrice Langston. I am in my assigned seat. Gloria looked at the boarding pass Beatrice was now holding out. She looked at it carefully, longer than was strictly necessary to verify a seat number, and Layla understood that the looking itself was a kind of statement. Then Gloria turned toward the back of the cabin. Sir, she said, I need you to come up here, please. Row 13. The man. He uncrossed his arms slowly, the way someone moves when they want to make it clear that they're complying on their own terms. He stood, adjusted his shirt, and walked up the aisle with the performance of a man who had decided to be magnanimous about being summoned. "Look," he said before Gloria could open her mouth, "I made a mistake with the seat. Fine, it happens. I already moved. What I don't appreciate is being lectured by a child and having accusations thrown around by strangers." "What accusations?" Gloria said. The woman said, "Mrs. Langston stated what happened," Gloria said. "She stated it clearly and directly." "That's not an accusation. That's a description." The man's mouth tightened. Gloria looked at him steadily. "Sir, multiple passengers witnessed you place your bag on Mrs. Langston's lap without consent and physically take hold of her wrist. Is that accurate?" "I barely touched her." "Is that accurate?" Gloria said again. A pause. "I was frustrated," he said. "I thought it was my seat." "It was not your seat," Gloria said. "And frustration is not a license to put your hands on someone. I need you to understand that clearly before this flight goes any further." The man looked around the cabin. He was doing the same calculation Layla had seen him do before, looking for the room to be on his side, looking for the expressions that would tell him he was the reasonable one here. But the expressions he found were not those. The woman in her 60s near the front was watching him with tight lips. The man in the gray suit had his eyes on Gloria, but his body angled toward the man in a way that said, "I'm paying attention." A younger woman in row 4 had her phone in her hand, not recording but close. Something went out of his posture. Not fully, but enough. "Fine," he said. "Thank you," Gloria said. "Return to your seat, please." He turned and walked back. He didn't make eye contact with anyone on the way. Gloria waited until he was seated, and then she turned to the cabin, and for a moment, she just stood there. And the cabin let her stand there, and the silence was its own kind of acknowledgement. "I want to thank the passengers who spoke up," she said, and she didn't look at anyone in particular when she said it, but Layla felt it land on her like a hand on the shoulder. "It matters." Then she walked back toward the galley, unhurried. Layla looked at Beatrice. Beatrice was looking at her. "She reminded me of someone," Beatrice said quietly. "Who?" Layla asked. Beatrice smiled. "My younger self," she said, "before I learned to stay quiet." Layla thought about that. Why did you learn to stay quiet? The question came out before Layla could decide whether it was too much. But Beatrice didn't seem bothered by it. She looked at the question the way you look at something you've been carrying for a long time. And someone finally noticed the weight. "Because it was easier," Beatrice said, "or I thought it was. For a very long time I believed that being quiet kept me safe." She paused. "It does not keep you safe. It only keeps you quiet." Layla wrote that down. Beatrice watched her write it, and something in her expression shifted into something almost like wonder. "You write everything down," she observed. "I want to remember things accurately," Layla said. "My mom says memory is unreliable. She's a lawyer." Beatrice raised an eyebrow. "Is she?" "She says if you want the truth of something, you have to write it down when it happens before your brain starts editing." "Your mother," Beatrice said carefully. "Sounds like a woman worth listening to." "She's pretty great," Layla agreed. Then after a beat, "She's going to be really upset when I tell her about this." "Upset at the man?" Beatrice asked. "Upset that it happened," Layla said, "and that nobody stopped it faster." Rosalind, who had been listening from across the aisle without appearing to, made a soft sound of agreement. From row 13, silence. The man had his phone out and his eyes down, doing his own version of the headphone strategy, the visual declaration of absence. Even while present, the plane still hadn't moved. The man in the gray suit leaned across the aisle. He spoke to Beatrice directly, which felt important, the directness of it. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology." Beatrice looked at him. "I saw what he did," the man said when he grabbed your wrist. "I saw it, and I didn't say anything right away. I should have." A beat. You said something eventually, Beatrice said. Not fast enough. No, she said, not unkindly. But you said it. The man nodded. His name, it would turn out later, was Julian Carver. He was a corporate attorney from Chicago flying to Atlanta for a conference. And he would spend a significant portion of the flight thinking about the specific calculation he'd made in that first moment, the weighing of involvement against distance, the quiet arithmetic of how much something was his problem. He would not be proud of that calculation. My name is Beatrice Langston, Beatrice said, and she offered her hand. Julian Carver, he said, and shook it. Layla wrote both names in her notebook. The plane remained stopped. And then, from somewhere behind the galley curtain, a voice. Gloria's voice, lower now, but the cabin was quiet enough that edges of it reached the front rows. She was on the phone. The words weren't fully audible, but some of them were. Incident report, passenger conduct, ground supervisor. Layla's pen stopped moving. She looked at Rosalind. Rosalind was already looking toward the galley. She's filing a report, Layla said softly. Yes, Rosalind said. Does that mean... I don't know yet, Rosalind said. Minutes passed. The engines hummed at idle. Outside, the tarmac was doing nothing in particular. Inside, the cabin had entered that specific kind of suspension that happens when everyone is waiting for something but pretending to be doing something else. Then Gloria came back through the curtain. She walked directly to row 3. She crouched down slightly so she was at eye level with Rosalind. We've contacted the ground supervisor, she said low and even. Given the nature of the physical contact with Mrs. Langston, we're required to have him assess the situation before we can continue the flight. We're waiting for him to board. Rosalind nodded slowly. How long? A short while. Does the passenger know? Gloria's expression answered the question without her having to say anything. Then she said, He will. She straightened and walked back toward row 13. Layla leaned forward slightly and looked past Rosalind to watch. Gloria stopped at the man's row. She spoke to him quietly. Layla couldn't hear the words, but she could see his face, and she watched the performance of inconvenienced impatience dissolve into something else entirely. Something that looked from a distance very much like the first real flicker of consequence. He said something, Gloria responded. He said something else louder now, and a word or two reached the front of the cabin. Delayed, overreacting, ridiculous. Gloria said something final. She walked away before he could respond. The man sat very still in his seat for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and started typing with both thumbs hard and fast. The way people type when they're angry, and they want their anger to have somewhere to go. Layla looked at Beatrice. Are you okay? She asked again. The same question as before, but weighted differently. Now Beatrice turned to her, and this time when she looked at Layla, something had shifted. The composure was still there, but underneath it, something had loosened, something that had been held very tight for a very long time. I flew first class for the first time years ago, Beatrice said. Her voice was quiet, not quite a whisper, but close. I had saved for months. I was a nurse. I wore my best dress. She paused. A man told me I was in the wrong seat that time, too. Layla went very still. Was he? She asked. No, Beatrice said simply. A silence settled between them, soft and heavy at the same time. Did anyone help you? Layla asked. Beatrice looked at her for a long moment. Then she shook her head. The word landed in Layla's chest like a stone into water. The way certain truths land when you're young enough that they haven't lost the weight of surprise yet. Not one person, Beatrice said. I moved to coach. I sat in a middle seat for hours. I told myself it did not matter. She looked down at her folded hands. I have been telling myself that for years. Layla looked at the boarding pass in her own lap. Seat 3A, her name printed on it. Paid for, earned, rightfully hers. And she thought, I almost didn't say anything. When she had seen the man sitting in the seat, her first impulse had been to let Rosalind handle it, to be the child, to let the adults sort it out. And if the man hadn't grabbed Beatrice's wrist, If it had stayed a verbal confrontation, would she have stepped in? She wanted to say yes. She wasn't sure. She wasn't sure, and that uncertainty felt important. It felt like the beginning of something she was going to carry for a long time. "I'm glad I said something," she said finally. "So am I," Beatrice said. "I'm glad you said something too," Layla said. "When you told him what it really was, not a seating issue." Beatrice smiled. Small, private. "It felt good," she admitted. "Terrifying but good, like jumping off a diving board," Layla said. Beatrice looked at her exactly like that, she said. The boarding door opened. Not a crew member this time. A man in a dark blue uniform, mid-40s, with the particular kind of calm authority that comes with a title. His name tag read, Raymond Tate, Ground Supervisor. He stepped into the first-class cabin and looked around once, taking inventory, the practiced visual sweep of someone who had walked into complicated rooms before. Gloria met him at the front and spoke briefly in his ear. He nodded once, then he looked down the cabin, past the first-class rows toward 13. The man in row 13 looked up from his phone, and for the first time since he had boarded this flight, he looked genuinely uncertain. Layla watched it happen. The flicker, the recalculation. She watched him look from Raymond Tate to Gloria, to the back of Beatrice Langston's head to the other passengers watching him. And she watched the full weight of the situation seem to arrive in his body at once. The way gravity arrives when you realize you've stepped off a ledge. Raymond Tate walked past Layla's row without stopping. He walked all the way to 13. And when he spoke, his voice was quiet enough that the words were lost, but his face said enough. Layla looked at Rosalind. Rosalind was watching the back of the plane, and Rosalind's face, for the first time since this whole thing had started, had let the tension go just slightly, just enough to say, "We're not done, but we're getting somewhere." Layla turned back to her notebook. The page was almost full. She flipped to a new one, and at the top in careful letters, she wrote, "What brave is." Then underneath it, she wrote Beatrice's name, and then she stopped writing because some things were too important to summarize, and this was one of them. Some things needed to stay whole. Raymond Tate spent some time in row 13. Layla knew because she counted. She had her eyes on her notebook, but her entire nervous system was tuned to the back of that cabin. Every word inaudible, but every silence between words louder than anything. Then Raymond Tate walked back up the aisle. He stopped at row 3. He looked at Beatrice first directly, the way Gloria had, with that same specific quality of attention. That meant he was doing more than checking a box. "Mrs. Langston," he said, "I've spoken with the passenger. I want to verify a few things with you directly if that's all right." "Of course," Beatrice said. "Can you describe in your own words what happened when he approached your seat?" Beatrice's hands were folded in her lap. She spoke without hesitation, without drama, with the clean economy of a woman who had been asked to describe difficult things before and had learned that plainness was its own kind of power. She described the bag landing on her lap, the grip on her wrist, the words that followed. She described it all in the same tone, level and clear, the way you give testimony when you know the weight of the room. Raymond listened without interrupting. He had a small notebook of his own, different from Layla's sunflower one, black and official looking, and he wrote in it as Beatrice spoke. When she finished, he nodded. "And you, ma'am?" He turned to Rosalind. Rosalind gave her account. Shorter, equally precise. Then Raymond looked at Layla. Layla sat up slightly. "I saw all of it," she said. "I was standing right there when he dropped the bag on her, and I heard what he said." Later, from row 13. "The comment," Raymond said. "Yes." Layla said, "Can you tell me exactly what you heard?" Layla looked at him steadily. "He called her something. I only caught 2 words because the engines were loud, but I know what they were." Raymond looked at her for a moment. "How certain are you?" "Completely," Layla said. She watched him write it down. She watched his pen move, and she felt something settle in her chest. The particular feeling of being believed, which was different from being listened to, and the difference mattered. Raymond closed his notebook. "Thank you," he said. He looked at Beatrice once more. "Mrs. Langston, I want you to know that what you've described constitutes a reportable incident under FAA passenger conduct guidelines. The airline takes physical contact between passengers very seriously. I'm going to be speaking with the captain." Beatrice held his gaze. And then, Raymond said carefully, "we'll determine how to proceed." He moved to the front of the cabin and disappeared behind the cockpit door. Layla looked at Rosalind. Rosalind's expression was doing the thing it did when the situation was serious enough that she didn't want to put false comfort in the air. She met Layla's eyes and gave her a small, honest look that said, "I don't know yet, but it's moving." The cabin breathed. Julian Carver from across the aisle leaned forward slightly. "He's going to pull him off the plane," he said quietly, just for the rows immediately around him. "You think?" Rosalind asked. Physical contact with another passenger. Racial slur confirmed by a minor witness. Incident report filed. Julian paused. "Yeah, he's getting pulled." From the back of the cabin came the sound of movement. The man from row 13 was standing. He had his large duffel bag in hand and his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a low, urgent voice. His body language had completed its transformation from the aggressive entitlement of boarding to something smaller and tighter. The posture of a man who had started to understand the architecture of the situation he had built for himself. He walked up the aisle. He was not heading for the exit. He was heading for Raymond Tate, who had just come back out of the cockpit door. The man put himself directly in Raymond's path with the confidence of someone who had spent a career believing that a firm enough approach could reverse any outcome. "I need to talk to you," the man said. "Not a request." "Sir," Raymond said, "I know people at this airline. I fly a lot on this carrier. Gold status. Whatever complaint that woman filed, I want it on record that there are two sides to this." "There are always two sides," Raymond said. "I've heard yours. Then you understand this is being blown completely out of proportion." "Sir." Raymond's voice stayed even, but something in its register dropped just enough. "I've spoken with the captain. We need you to come with me." The man stared at him. "Come with you where?" "Off the aircraft." The cabin went absolutely silent. Even the ambient sound of the plane seemed to contract. The recycled air, the distant engine idle, the small electronic chirps of devices, all of it fell back as if the whole vessel was holding its breath for what happened next. The man's face moved through disbelief, then fury, then the particular white-hot calculation of someone deciding whether to escalate or accept. "You are not removing me from this flight," he said. "We are," Raymond said simply. "You can come willingly, or we can ask the gate agents to assist. Either way, this flight does not push back with you on it. I will sue this airline." "That is your right," Raymond said. "I want your name and your supervisor's name, and I want it in writing right now." Raymond reached into his breast pocket and produced a card. He held it out. "My name, my direct line, and the airline's passenger relations department. It's all there." The man took the card. He looked at it. He looked at Raymond. He looked down the cabin toward Beatrice Langston, who had not turned around, who was sitting with her hands folded and her gaze forward, her posture unchanged from the moment she had first sat down. Then he looked at Layla. Layla did not look away. Whatever the man saw in her face, it did not give him what he was looking for. He looked away first. He picked up his duffel bag and he walked off the plane without another word. Raymond 2 steps behind him, the door closing with a soft, pressurized click. For 3 full seconds, nobody spoke. Then the woman in her 60s near the front turned around and started clapping. It was the most surprising sound Layla had ever heard on an airplane. One person clapping alone, and then not alone because Julian Carver joined, and then the couple near the front, and then someone behind them. And then the sound was moving through the first-class cabin like water finding its way downhill, reaching row after row. Not thunderous, not a standing ovation, just real and warm and honest. The sound of people who had been quiet for too long deciding they weren't anymore. Layla's face went hot. She looked at Beatrice. Beatrice had both hands over her mouth. Her eyes were wet. It was the first crack in the composure. The first moment in all of it where the woman who had been sitting in that seat for years of invisible erosion let something through. She pressed her hands harder against her mouth and blinked, and the tears did not fall. She wouldn't let them fall, but they were there, and Layla saw them, and it was the most important thing she had ever seen on a plane. Layla reached over. She put her small hand on top of Beatrice's folded hands. Beatrice looked down at it. Then she looked at Layla. She took her hands from her mouth and covered Layla's hand with both of hers. They stayed like that without speaking, and the cabin continued its applause around them, and Rosalind pressed her fingers to her lips and breathed through her nose, and Julian Carver sat back in his seat and looked at the ceiling for a moment, in the way people do when they are trying to keep themselves together. The applause faded. Quiet settled back in, but it was a different quiet now. It had warmth in it. Gloria came through the galley curtain. She looked at the cabin, took it in, and allowed herself a single composed smile, the kind that cost nothing to give and meant everything to receive. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the captain's voice through the intercom, "we apologize for the additional delay. We'll be ready for departure shortly. On behalf of the crew, thank you for your patience." Layla looked at her notebook. She had stopped writing somewhere in the middle of Raymond Tate's conversation with the man. She looked at the last thing she had written. What brave is. She looked at the name below it. Beatrice Langston. She turned to a fresh page and wrote, "He's off the plane." Then she wrote, "She cried almost. Then I held her hand." She looked at those 3 lines for a long time. Beatrice released Layla's hand gently and straightened in her seat. She reached into her blazer pocket and produced a small folded tissue and used it with quick precision and put it away again. When she turned back, her composure was restored, but it was different now, softer, like a wall that had been lowered by one brick. "Where are you traveling to?" she asked Layla. "Atlanta," Layla said. "For my birthday." "In Atlanta," Beatrice said. "My grandmother lives there, Nana Pearl. She makes sweet potato pie." "How wonderful," Beatrice said, and she meant it entirely in the way that people with grandchildren of their own mean it when someone mentions a grandmother. "I am also going to Atlanta. I have a granddaughter there. She is 6. Does she know you're coming?" "It is a surprise," Beatrice said, and she smiled again, full this time. Layla grinned. "She is going to lose her mind." Beatrice laughed. It was a rich, full sound, and it seemed to surprise her slightly, the way laughing surprises people when it arrives at an unexpected moment. Several nearby passengers glanced over and smiled reflexively, the involuntary human response to someone else's genuine laughter. Rosalind across the aisle watched this exchange with an expression of such quiet joy that she had to look down at her own hands to keep it from becoming something larger. Then Gloria stopped at row 3 one more time. "Mrs. Langston," she said, "can I get you anything, drink, snack, anything at all?" "I would love a cup of tea," Beatrice said, "if it's not too much trouble." "Not a single bit," Gloria said. She looked at Layla. "And for you?" "Orange juice, please," Layla said, "and maybe some of those little cookies if you have them." "We have them," Gloria said. She looked at the 2 of them together, the 72-year-old woman in the plum blazer and the 10-year-old girl in the yellow cardigan. And something moved across her face that was beyond professional warmth, something personal. She started to say something, then she stopped. Then she said it anyway. "I've been doing this job for years," she said, "and I want you both to know that this morning mattered. What happened here mattered." She paused. "I should have moved faster." Beatrice looked at her. "You moved," she said simply. Gloria nodded once and walked back to the galley. Julian Carver cleared his throat from across the aisle. "Mrs. Langston," he said. Beatrice looked at him. "I said it before, but I want to say it again. I'm sorry I didn't act sooner. I made a calculation I'm not proud of." "Tell me about your calculation," Beatrice said. Not unkindly, not accusingly, with the genuine curiosity of someone who wanted to understand the mechanics of silence, the engineering of looking away. Julian was quiet for a moment. He was not a man who seemed accustomed to being asked to examine himself in real time in public, but he was making an honest effort. I told myself it wasn't my place, he said. That it would escalate things if I stepped in, that someone else would handle it. He paused. The truth is, I didn't want the friction. I didn't want him turning that energy toward me. Beatrice nodded slowly. And do you think the child made that same calculation? Julian looked at Layla. Layla looked back at him with the frank attention of a 10-year-old who had not yet learned to pretend not to be listening when adults talked about them. No, Julian said. She didn't. No, Beatrice agreed. She did not because she didn't know to be afraid of the friction. Layla said, honestly, I was scared, but I didn't think about whether it was my place. I just thought it was wrong. Julian was quiet for a beat. Yeah, he said. That's the part I lost somewhere along the way. Nobody had a response to that. It didn't need one. It sat in the air between all of them, honest and a little heavy, the way true things sometimes are. The plane began moving again. The engines climbed through their register and the cabin reorganized itself around the rhythm of imminent departure. Passengers put away phones and pulled out books and settled into the particular posture of people preparing to be airborne. Gloria brought the tea and the orange juice and the little cookies arranged on a small tray with a care that was more than service. Layla ate a cookie and looked out the window at the runway unspooling ahead of them. She was thinking about Beatrice on a plane years ago, wearing her best dress, months of savings, moving to coach without a single person saying a word, sitting in a middle seat for hours, telling herself it did not matter. She thought, what if someone had said something that day? What would the next years have felt like, even slightly if one person had said it was wrong? She didn't know the answer. She wasn't sure anyone did. But the question felt important to carry. The plane lifted. That familiar lurch of gravity adjusting, the ground pulling away, the city tilting beneath them, and then straightening as the plane banked and climbed. Chicago spread out below, grid streets and the gray glitter of Lake Michigan. And Layla pressed her forehead to the window and watched it the way she had watched it through the car window on the way to the airport, storing it. Then Beatrice spoke. May I ask you something, Layla? Layla turned from the window. Sure. When you stepped forward, Beatrice said, and you told him to let go of me, were you thinking about anything specific, or was it just reflex? Layla thought about it honestly. She gave it the real attention the question deserved rather than the quick, easy answer. I was thinking, she said slowly, about how everyone else was looking away. And I thought, if I look away too, then there's nobody, and I didn't want there to be nobody. Beatrice absorbed this. I didn't want you to have nobody, Layla added quieter. Beatrice turned to look at her fully, and the expression on her face was something that a 10-year-old could feel the weight of, even without having the complete vocabulary for it. It was grief and gratitude, and something that was almost recognition, like looking at something you had once been and thought was gone. I had nobody, Beatrice said softly. For a very long time in rooms like this, I had nobody. You have somebody now, Layla said. Beatrice reached over and tucked a strand of Layla's hair back gently, the way grandmothers do, the automatic tenderness of it. And then she seemed to notice what she had done and pulled her hand back slightly, almost apologetic. It's okay, Layla said and smiled. Beatrice smiled back. Your Nana Pearl, she said, is a very lucky woman. She says the same thing, Layla said about herself all the time. It's actually kind of a lot. Beatrice laughed again, and this time it didn't surprise her. And then Rosalind from across the aisle said quietly, Layla, look. Layla turned. Julian Carver had his laptop open. He was writing something, and he was writing it with the focus of someone who had made a decision. His fingers moved fast. He had the expression of a man clearing something out of himself and putting it somewhere it could be seen. Rosalind caught his eye. What are you writing? She asked. He looked up. An account? He said of what happened this morning. I'm going to share it. Share it where? Layla asked. Everywhere I can, he said. I have many connections. Legal and business community mostly. People who make the same calculation I made this morning without thinking about it. He paused. I want them to think about it. A silence. Then Layla said, "Are you going to use our names?" "Only with permission," he said. Layla looked at Beatrice. Beatrice looked at Layla. Something passed between them in that look, fast and wordless. The kind of communication that does not require a shared history to be perfectly understood. "Yes," Beatrice said. "Yes," Layla said. Julian nodded and went back to typing. The plane was at altitude now, the seatbelt sign chiming off. The first-class cabin settled into its cruising rhythm. Gloria moved through with the drink cart. The woman near the front had taken out a novel. The couple toward the forward bulkhead were sharing earbuds, watching something on a shared screen. Layla opened her sunflower notebook. She looked at all the pages she had filled since boarding. The timeline, the names, the quotes, the 2 words she had heard through the engine noise that she had told Raymond Tate about, and not written down because some things needed to be reported but not preserved. She turned to a fresh page and started writing something new. Not notes this time. Not a timeline. A letter. She wasn't sure who it was for yet. Maybe Nana Pearl. Maybe her mother. Maybe herself at an older age. The version of herself that might need to be reminded of this morning when the calculations started to feel more complicated. She wrote slowly, deliberately, the way she wrote things she wanted to keep. She wrote, "Today I learned that brave isn't the same as not scared. Brave is being scared and deciding that someone else's nobody matters more than your own comfort." She read it back. She thought about Beatrice on a plane years ago alone in her best dress. She thought about Julian Carver making his calculation. She thought about the woman near the front who had started clapping, and the way the sound had moved through the cabin like a wave that had been gathering for a long time. She added one line, "And I learned that nobody is truly nobody, as long as one person decides to look." She closed the notebook. Beatrice was looking out her window. The clouds were below them now, a white, irregular surface that looked from up here almost solid. She had her tea cradled in both hands, and she was looking at the clouds with the expression of someone deep inside a thought that had been waiting for the right moment to surface. "What are you thinking about?" Layla asked. Beatrice was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I am thinking about my granddaughter. She is 6. She does not know yet that there are rooms where people will try to tell her she does not belong." She paused. "I have been dreading the day she learns." "Maybe," Layla said carefully, "she'll have somebody." Beatrice turned and looked at her. "Like I had you," Layla said, "and you had me." Beatrice pressed her lips together. She nodded once slowly, like a decision being made rather than a response being given. And then Layla's phone buzzed. She looked at it. A text from her mother. 3 words. "How's first class?" Layla looked at the question. She looked at Beatrice beside her, at Rosalind across the aisle, at Julian Carver typing his many words into the world, at the woman near the front who had started something with a single pair of clapping hands, at the empty space where a man in row 13 used to be. She typed back, "Better than expected." She hit send. And from the back of the plane, from the rows behind first class, where the ordinary business of the flight was underway, where most of the passengers had no idea what had happened in the first 5 rows of this aircraft on this morning, a flight attendant was walking forward with a folded piece of paper in her hand. She stopped at row 3. She held the paper out to Beatrice. From the crew, she said, "All of us." Beatrice unfolded it. She read it. Her hands went still. She read it again. Then she handed it to Layla. Layla read it. It was signed by 7 names. Every member of the flight crew, and above the signatures in clear printed letters were 6 words, "Thank you for not staying quiet." Layla looked at Beatrice. Beatrice was looking straight ahead again. Her jaw was set. Her posture was perfect. And her eyes were doing the thing again, that shimmer that wouldn't become tears because she would not let it, and also because she was smiling too hard. Layla folded the paper carefully and handed it back. Beatrice tucked it into her blazer pocket close to her chest. And outside the window somewhere over the Midwest, the clouds broke open and the light came through clean and gold and total. The way it does when you've been above the weather long enough to forget it was ever there. The folded piece of paper stayed in Beatrice's blazer pocket for the rest of the flight. But Layla thought about it constantly. The way you think about something that has shifted the weight of a room without anyone saying out loud that the room has shifted. 7 signatures, 6 words. She turned them over in her mind like a smooth stone, feeling the edges of them. Rosalind had fallen into a light doze somewhere over the south. Her head tilted against the headrest, her reading glasses still on. The cabin had reached its cruising equilibrium, that particular in-between state of a flight at altitude, where time moves differently and conversations go deeper than they might anywhere else on Earth. Something about being above the weather loosened people, removed the ordinary architecture of avoidance. Julian Carver had finished typing. He had read the whole thing back, made small corrections, and then sat with his finger over the post button for almost 2 full minutes before he pressed it. Layla had watched him do it from the corner of her eye. She had seen the exhale that came after. "Posted," he said to no one in particular. "What did you write?" Layla asked. He turned the laptop toward her. The post was long. It began with the words, "This morning, I made a choice I'm not proud of. I watched a 72-year-old woman get physically handled in a first-class cabin while I calculated whether it was my place to speak." Layla read the first paragraph, then the second. Then she looked up. "You put your own mistake in it," she said. "That's the only part that might actually do something," Julian said. "Anyone can condemn someone else's behavior. That's easy. But if I just write about him, everyone who reads it already knows they would never be him." They closed the tab feeling good about themselves. He paused. "I need them to see themselves in me because most of them are." Layla looked back at the screen. She kept reading. He had written about Beatrice's words exactly as she had said them, not a seating issue. He had written about Layla stepping into the aisle. He had written about the clapping. He had written about Gloria and Raymond, and then he had written at the end something that made Layla stop breathing for a moment. "The child who spoke up is 10 years old. She told me that she didn't think about whether it was her place. She just thought it was wrong. I have been an attorney for years. I negotiate for a living. I am paid to assess risk and act strategically. And somewhere between law school and today, I replaced the question, 'Is this wrong?' with, 'Is this my problem?' I am putting that question back the way it was. Starting this morning at cruising altitude, because a 10-year-old girl in a yellow cardigan reminded me which question matters." Layla looked up at Julian. "Is that okay?" he asked. "I can take the yellow cardigan out if you want." "Keep it in," Layla said. He smiled. First real smile she had seen from him. She turned to Beatrice to read her the paragraph, but Beatrice was already asleep. It happened so quietly and completely that for a moment Layla didn't register it. The older woman had her hands folded in her lap, her head barely inclined, her breathing slow and even. The plum blazer rose and fell. The pearl earrings caught the cabin light. She looked in sleep like someone who had put down something very heavy and was finally for a few hours free of its weight. Layla watched her for a moment. Then she very carefully opened her notebook and wrote, "She's sleeping. I think it's the first time she's been able to relax since she got on this plane. Maybe longer than that." She closed the notebook and looked out the window. Then her phone buzzed again. Not her mother this time, a number she didn't recognize. She almost let it go to voicemail. Then she looked at the area code and something in her stopped. "Chicago local number," she answered. "Is this Layla Bennett?" A woman's voice. Young, professional, slightly breathless. "Yes," Layla said, cautious. "My name is Sophia Ramirez. I'm a reporter with the Chicago Tribune. I'm sorry to reach you directly. I got this number through a mutual contact, and I completely understand if you don't want to speak with me, but I've just seen a post that's going viral and your name is in it, and I wanted to reach you before." "Wait," Layla said. "What?" "The post by Julian Carver. It was posted about a short while ago, and it's already been shared many times. There are other platforms picking it up now. Your name is in it." Layla stared at the seat back in front of her. She looked across the aisle at Julian. Julian had his phone out. His eyebrows were raised. He was scrolling. And as Layla watched, the expression on his face moved from surprise to something beyond surprise. The particular look of a person who has released something into the world and is watching it move faster than they expected. "Hold on," Layla said into her phone. She lowered it. How many shares? She asked Julian. He looked up. How did you? Then he registered the phone in her hand. He looked back at his screen. Many, he said. In the last short while, it jumped. He stopped. There's a journalist in the comments asking for contact information. I have one on the phone, Layla said. Julian stared at her. Layla put the phone back to her ear. Ms. Ramirez, I'm 10. You need to talk to my mom before I say anything to you. Of course, absolutely. I completely understand. Her name is Vanessa Bennett. She's an attorney in Chicago. You can find her. Okay. Yes. Can I ask you just one thing before? You can ask, Layla said. Is everything in the post accurate? Layla thought about it. The bag on the lap, the wrist, the 2 words through the engine noise, the empty seat in row 13. Yes, she said. Thank you, Sofia Ramirez said. I'll reach out to your mother. Layla ended the call and looked at it for a moment. Rosalind stirred across the aisle. She opened her eyes, took in Layla's expression, took in Julian's expression and said, What happened? The post is going viral, Layla said. Rosalind sat up. Her reading glasses slid down her nose. She pushed them back up. Define viral. Many shares and a journalist called my phone, Layla said. In the last short while, Rosalind said. Julian said he was still scrolling. There are more journalists in the comments now, and someone from a major television network just tagged the airline's official account. Rosalind took her reading glasses off entirely and put them in her lap. She looked at the ceiling for exactly 3 seconds. Then she looked at Layla. Your mother is going to call you, she said. I know, Layla said as if on cue. The phone buzzed. Vanessa Bennett. Layla answered before the second buzz. Tell me everything, her mother said. And the tone of her voice was the one Layla called the courtroom voice, low and focused and moving fast. So Layla told her all of it. From the wrist grab at boarding through Raymond Tate and the ground supervisor protocol, and the man deplaning and the crew note and Julian's post and Sofia Ramirez's call. She told it in order without drama, the way her mother had taught her. Facts first and feelings after. Her mother listened without interrupting until the end. Then she said, Are you okay? Yes. Is Beatrice Langston okay? She's sleeping next to me right now. A brief silence. Okay, her mother said. Here's what's going to happen. Do not speak to any journalists. Do not post anything yourself. Do not let anyone on that plane take a photo of you or Beatrice without explicit permission. When you land, you will come directly to me. You're meeting us at the airport. I'm getting in the car right now. Her mother said Nana Pearl is going to have to wait for her sweet potato pie situation because her daughter needs to be at the airport in Atlanta soon. Layla felt something loosen in her chest, not the tension of the morning. That had already moved into something else. This was different. This was the loosening that happens when you realize you have been carrying something and someone is about to help you carry it. Mom, she said. Yeah, baby. I didn't think about it being this big. I know you didn't, her mother said. You thought about it being wrong. That's the right order. They said goodbye. Layla put the phone down and looked at Julian, who was still watching his screen with the expression of a man riding a wave he had not fully anticipated. Many shares, he said. Beatrice stirred beside Layla. She woke the way older people sometimes wake, with complete awareness rather than the slow surfacing of youth, as if she had been waiting just below consciousness and simply decided to come back. She blinked once, looked at her window, then looked at Layla, and her expression was clear and unhurried. Did I sleep long? She asked. A while, Layla said. Beatrice reached up and touched her hair, patting it back into order. Then she looked at Layla's face and read something in it. What has happened? Layla looked at Julian. Julian turned the laptop around. Beatrice read the post. She read it slowly. Her lips moved slightly on some of the words. When she got to the paragraph about herself, she stopped completely, and her hands, which were resting on the tray table, pressed flat and still. She read to the end. She looked up at Julian. You wrote this? Yes, ma'am. And people are reading it. A lot of people, he said carefully. Beatrice turned to look at Layla. Did you know he was going to write this? I knew he was writing something, Layla said. I didn't know it would go like this. Beatrice was quiet. Layla watched her process it, watched the careful movement of thought behind the composed exterior. It wasn't discomfort exactly. It was something more complicated. The particular feeling of a private thing becoming public, of a story that had lived inside you for years, suddenly standing in a room full of strangers. Are you okay with it? Layla asked. He said he'd take your name out if you want. I said yes, Beatrice said quietly. On this plane, when he asked, I said yes. She paused. I am not going to take it back. Okay, Layla said. I've been a private person my entire life, Beatrice said to no one in particular. I have kept things inside because keeping them inside felt like dignity. But sometimes what feels like dignity is just silence. She was quiet for a moment, and silence has not changed anything. Julian was watching her. Mrs. Langston, he said, if it helps at all, what I wrote isn't about the pain of what happened to you. It's about the failure of people like me to act. He paused. You're not a victim in what I wrote. You're the standard. Beatrice looked at him for a long moment. That is a meaningful distinction, she said. I know. I accept your apology, she said for the second time. And I mean it both times. Julian nodded. Something in his shoulders released. Gloria appeared with a tray. She had brought water and small dishes of warm nuts and a cup of fresh tea for Beatrice without being asked. She set it on the tray table and straightened. And Layla noticed her glance at the laptop screen, at the number of shares now visible in the corner of Julian's browser. She didn't say anything about it. She just looked at Beatrice and said, About an hour to Atlanta, Mrs. Langston. Thank you, Gloria, Beatrice said. Gloria moved away, and Rosalind leaned across the aisle and said quietly, The woman near the front, she's on her phone. She's been on it for a while since Julian's post went up. Layla looked. The woman in her 60s, the one who had started the applause, was leaning toward the window with her phone held up close, reading something with the focused intent of a person who had found themselves mentioned somewhere. She might have seen the post, Rosalind said, as if she had heard the words. The woman turned. She looked directly at Layla. Then she looked at Beatrice. Then she stood up, steadied herself on the headrest, and walked the 4 rows back to where they sat. She was tall, broadly built, with a white pixie cut, and the kind of direct eyes that meant she had decided something before she got up. My name is Margaret Ellis, she said, addressing both Layla and Beatrice equally. I want to say something to you both, and I'll say it quick because I'm not one for speeches. Beatrice gestured at the seat across the aisle, where Rosalind had obligingly leaned her legs aside to make room for a conversation. Margaret didn't sit. She stood in the aisle. I saw the wrist grab, she said. I saw it and I thought about saying something and I went back to my book instead. I have been angry at myself about it for the last few hours. She looked at Beatrice. I'm sorry. You started the applause. Beatrice said, Too late, Margaret said. But you started it, Beatrice said. And because you started it, it became a sound instead of a silence. Do not take that away from yourself. Margaret looked at her for a moment with the expression of someone receiving a kindness they hadn't expected and weren't entirely sure they'd earned. You're a generous woman, she said. I have a granddaughter, Beatrice said, and I want her to grow up in a world where people do better than the first instinct. You did better. It counts. Margaret Ellis pressed her lips together. She nodded once, sharp and deliberate, the nod of someone filing something away permanently. Then she looked at Layla. And you, she said, are going to be something. I already am something, Layla said. I'm 10. Margaret laughed short and genuine and walked back to her seat. Rosalind put her hand over her mouth. Layla grinned and looked at Beatrice, who was shaking her head with a smile that reached all the way up. Then Layla's phone buzzed again. Not her mother, not a journalist, a number with an Atlanta area code. She looked at it. I don't know this number, she said. Don't answer it, Rosalind said. The call ended. Then immediately a text from the same number appeared. Layla read it, and the grin left her face. What? Rosalind said. Layla held the phone out. Rosalind read it. Her expression changed completely. Julian saw the shift. "What is it?" he asked. Rosalind looked up slowly. She looked at Layla, then at Beatrice, then at Julian. She said, "It's from someone claiming to be the man's daughter." The cabin, which had settled into its warm post-crisis rhythm, seemed to cool by several degrees. "What does it say?" Julian asked. Rosalind hesitated. Then she read it aloud, quietly enough that only the immediate rouse could hear. "My father is not a racist. He has a temper, and he made a mistake, and you people are destroying his life over a seat on an airplane. That little girl is going to regret this. Take the post down or we will pursue legal action." A silence. Then Layla said, "We people." Nobody had an answer for that. The text sat there in the air between all of them. The kind of message that arrives when a story gets large enough that the other side feels the pressure of it. Layla looked at it. She thought about the word regret. She thought about a man who had gripped a 72-year-old woman's wrist. She thought about the words she had heard through the engine noise. She looked at Beatrice. "Are you scared?" she asked. "That this is going to get complicated?" Beatrice thought about it. She gave the question the genuine weight it deserved. "I have been scared my entire life," she said at last. Scared to speak, scared to push back, scared to be seen as the one who made things difficult. She paused. "Do you know what I have to show for all that being scared?" Layla shook her head. "Nothing," Beatrice said simply. Years of nothing changed. She looked at the phone in Layla's hand. "Let them pursue their legal action. I have a boarding pass. I have witnesses. I have a crew report. And I have a lawyer's daughter sitting next to me." Layla looked at Rosalind. Rosalind nodded slowly. "Your mother is going to want to see that text," she said. Layla forwarded it to her mother without another word. The 3 dots of her mother's typing appeared almost instantly. And then, "I see it. Don't respond. Don't worry. I've got it." Layla put the phone down. Julian had gone very quiet. He was looking at his laptop. His post had crossed many shares while they were reading the text. He was reading the comments now, and whatever he was seeing in them was making his jaw tighten slightly. "The comments," he said. "Some of them are bad." "How bad?" Rosalind asked. "People speculating about who he is. Some of them have the wrong person. Someone's published a name with a photo, and it's the wrong man entirely." He put a hand over his face briefly. "This is why I should have anonymized him." "Would it have spread the same way?" Layla asked. A pause. "No," Julian admitted. "Probably not." "Does the wrong person know they've been misidentified?" Rosalind asked. "I don't know." Julian was typing fast. He was writing a follow-up comment directly under the post. Layla watched him write. "To anyone who believes they have identified the individual in this post, I am not confirming any names. I will not confirm any names. If you have published someone's personal information based on speculation, please remove it immediately. That is not what this post is for. This post is about accountability, not harassment." He posted it and sat back. That was the right thing to do. Rosalind said it won't be enough. He said once something's moving this fast, you can't fully steer it. You tried. Layla said, "Trying isn't always enough." "No," she said, "but it's still what you do." He looked at her. "You sound like you're 40, he said. "My mom says the same thing," she said. "She thinks it's a compliment." "It is," he said. The seatbelt sign chimed on. The captain's voice followed, smooth and routine. "Beginning descent into Atlanta. Local temperature warm. On schedule to arrive at Gate B7. Gate B7. Layla wrote it in her notebook, not because she needed to remember it, but because the act of writing something down had become, over the course of this flight, a kind of ceremony, a way of saying, "This happened. I was here. I saw it." Beatrice felt the plane's angle change and put her tray table up. She straightened her blazer, adjusted her earrings. She had a composure about descent, about arrival, like she was preparing herself for the next thing rather than finishing the last. "Do you know which terminal your granddaughter will be in?" Layla asked. "Her mother is meeting me at arrivals," Beatrice said. "I told them my flight number, but not the seat. I did not want to make a fuss about first class." She smiled slightly. "Old habit." "You should tell them," Layla said. "The seat part." Beatrice looked at her. "It's yours." Layla said, "You paid for it. You sat in it. You defended it." She paused. "It's yours. You should say it out loud." Beatrice held her gaze for a long moment. The plane was descending through clouds now, the light outside changing as Georgia appeared below them through the breaks, green and wide, and getting closer. "You know what? I thought," Beatrice said finally. "When I first sat down in this seat and the flight attendant brought me the pre-boarding drink and I held that glass, I thought, this is what it was supposed to be all those years ago when I put on my best dress and saved for months. This is what it was supposed to feel like." Layla didn't say anything. She just listened. "And then he came," Beatrice said. "And for a moment when he dropped that bag on my lap, I thought, there it is. There is the thing that always comes. The thing that always shows up to remind you that you are tolerated, not welcomed." She paused. But then a child in a yellow cardigan said, "Stop." And a nanny said, "You need to do more than speak." And a woman turned around and started clapping. And a man wrote the truth about his own failure. She looked out the window and for the first time in years, she said, "The thing that always comes was not the last thing." Layla felt the words move through her. She didn't try to answer them. Some things didn't need an answer. They needed to be heard. The plane broke through the last layer of cloud, and Atlanta was below them, the city spreading wide and green in the late morning light. The highways and the towers and the neighborhoods all laid out like something drawn for them specifically, like an arrival that had been arranged by the whole morning's worth of small, brave decisions. The wheels touched the runway with a single, clean jolt. The cabin absorbed it, the engines reversed and the speed bled away. And as the plane slowed to its taxi pace, the ordinary sounds of arrival filled the space around them. Seatbelts clicking, overhead bins creaking as people shifted, the small percussion of a flight ending. And then, from the front of the plane, Gloria's voice came over the intercom. Not the standard arrival script, something different. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Atlanta. Before we taxi to the gate, the crew would like to take a moment, a brief pause. Today on this flight, something happened that reminded all of us why decency matters. We won't detail it for those who weren't aware, but we want to acknowledge the passengers who chose to act with courage and compassion when it would have been easier not to. You know who you are." Another pause shorter. "The world is better when people decide it's their place to speak. Thank you for deciding that today. We hope you carry it with you." The cabin was silent for a moment. Then Margaret Ellis started clapping again. And this time it wasn't just first class. The sound moved back through the curtain, through coach, through the full length of the plane. Passengers who had no idea what had happened in the first 5 rows. Clapping because the people around them were clapping because a flight attendant's voice had carried something real, and they could feel the realness of it even without the story behind it. Layla sat very still and let the sound move through her. Beatrice reached over without looking and took Layla's hand, and Layla held on. The plane taxied to gate B7. The jetway connected, the door opened, and outside, beyond the gate, beyond the terminal, beyond everything that had happened at cruising altitude, Atlanta was waiting, and so was a 6-year-old girl who had no idea her grandmother was coming, and Nana Pearl with sweet potato pie and a mother driving fast from across the city because her daughter had done something worth driving fast for. Rosalind reached over and touched Layla's arm gently. "Ready," she said. Layla looked at Beatrice. Beatrice looked at Layla. The boarding pass was still in Layla's lap, slightly creased from being held so many times. "Seat 3A. She reached across and put it in Beatrice's hand. "Keep mine," she said, "so you have both in case anyone ever asks." Beatrice looked down at the 2 boarding passes in her palm, hers and Layla's, 3A, twice, the proof of 2 people who had been exactly where they had the right to be. She folded them together carefully and placed them in the same pocket as the crew note, close to her chest, where they would stay. The jetway was longer than Layla remembered from the way in. Or maybe it just felt that way because now there was weight behind every step, the accumulated weight of everything that had happened in the hours between walking down this kind of tunnel in Chicago and walking up this one in Atlanta. She had her backpack on both shoulders and her sunflower notebook tucked under her arm, and she was aware, in a way she hadn't been at O'Hare, of how much the morning had changed the size of things. Beatrice walked beside her, not in front, not behind, beside. She had her rolling carry-on in one hand and her blazer still perfectly pressed and her posture still perfect. And if anyone watching from the gate had not been on that flight, they would have seen simply an older woman and a young girl walking together without any particular reason to look twice. They would not have seen the 2 boarding passes folded in a breast pocket. They would not have seen years of silence ending somewhere over the Midwest. They would not have seen any of it. That was the thing about the world. Layla thought most of it happened in the space between people, in the compressed air of a first-class cabin, in the grip of a wrist, in the step forward into an aisle. And from the outside, it looked like nothing at all. Rosalind walked just behind them. Julian Carver was a few steps further back, his laptop bag over one shoulder, his phone in his hand. He hadn't stopped monitoring the post. He had said quietly just before they deplaned that the share count had passed many. He said it the way you report a weather system, present tense, moving. They came through the gate door into the terminal and the world expanded suddenly around them. The noise and light and movement of a busy airport at mid-morning. And for a second, Layla felt the strange vertigo of stepping back into ordinary life after something that had been anything but. Then she heard her name. Not called out, said specifically and directly, close and fast, Layla. Her mother was already moving through the crowd toward her. Vanessa Bennett was 41 years old, 5'8", and she had the particular walk of someone who had spent years entering rooms where people expected her to be smaller than she was. She covered the distance between them in about 4 seconds, and then she had both arms around Layla, and Layla pressed her face into her mother's shoulder and held on. And for the first time since seat 3A and the sound of a bag hitting an old woman's lap, she felt something in her chest come fully undone. She didn't cry. She was 10, and she had made it this far without crying. And she was not going to stop now. But she held on, and her mother held tighter. And for a few seconds, the terminal and the noise and the many shares and the daughter's threatening text and all of it receded to a manageable distance. Then her mother pulled back and held her face in both hands and looked at her. Really looked. The way she looked at evidence, checking for damage. "You okay?" she said. "I'm okay," Layla said for real. Her mother searched her face for another second. Then she nodded. Then she looked past Layla to where Beatrice had stopped, giving them space, her hands folded, her expression warm and careful. Vanessa Bennett straightened to her full height. She walked the 3 steps to Beatrice and she extended her hand. "Mrs. Langston," she said. "My name is Vanessa Bennett. I am Layla's mother and I am an attorney, and I want to tell you directly that what happened to you this morning was wrong, that you have options, and that whatever you decide to do, my daughter made me very proud today." Beatrice took her hand and held it, rather than shaking it the way some older women hold a hand when they want to convey something that a handshake is too brief for. "Your daughter," Beatrice said, "made herself proud. You can only take partial credit." Vanessa Bennett blinked once. Then she smiled. "I'll take it," she said. Rosalind reached them, and she and Vanessa did the quick, efficient exchange of 2 people who communicate about Layla regularly and understand each other without much preamble. Rosalind passed her phone over. Vanessa looked at the screen. The threatening text from the man's daughter. Her expression did not change, which was its own kind of change. "Forward it to me," Vanessa said. "Already done," Rosalind said. Julian Carver arrived at the edge of their group and stopped, not wanting to intrude. But Layla turned and waved him over with a frankness that made Rosalind smile. "This is Julian Carver," Layla said to her mother. "He wrote the post." Julian held out his hand. "Mr. Carver," Vanessa said, shaking it. "I've read it in the last hour," he said. I've been reading it since you posted it. I was in the car. She looked at him steadily. It was honest, including the part about yourself. Especially that part, he said. Yes, Vanessa said. Especially that part. She paused. Do you have legal representation? Julian raised an eyebrow. Should I? The airline is about to have a very public situation on their hands. You're the one who made it public. That's not a liability for you legally, but it's worth being thoughtful. She looked at him directly. The daughter's text mentioned legal action toward my daughter. That's not going anywhere. But if the man himself decides to pursue a defamation angle against your post, it would be good to have thought through that in advance. Julian was quiet for a moment. Is that likely? It's unlikely and unwinnable because everything in your post is factual and corroborated, but unlikely doesn't mean impossible. She looked at Layla. My 10-year-old is a witness to a physical assault. I want that very clearly documented before anything else happens. Gloria filed an incident report on the plane. Layla said, I know Raymond Tate's report will also be on record. I've already called the airline's passenger relations line from the car. She said it without performance the way she said most things, like they were just the next logical step in a sequence that was already fully mapped in her head. Beatrice was watching Vanessa Bennett with an expression of quiet admiration. You called them from the car, she said. I was stuck on the highway anyway. Vanessa said she does this. Layla said she turns traffic into work time. The tension in the group shifted. Not gone, but softened. The way tension softens when people who are on the same side finally find each other in a room. Then Beatrice's phone rang. She pulled it from her blazer pocket and looked at the screen. Something moved across her face, soft and quick. My daughter, she said. She is here. Go, Layla said immediately. Beatrice looked at her, then at Vanessa, then back at Layla. She seemed to be measuring something, trying to decide how to say a goodbye that was proportionate to what had happened, which was impossible because no goodbye could be. And Layla could see her understanding that. Go, Layla said again softer. Your granddaughter is waiting. Beatrice answered her phone. I am just through the gate, baby, she said into it. I am coming. She ended the call and looked at Layla one last time. I do not know how to thank you, she said. You already did, Layla said on the plane multiple times. I mean, for the bigger thing. Layla understood what she meant. You did the bigger thing yourself, she said when you turned around and said what it really was, not a seating issue. Beatrice's composure moved again, that shimmer at the edge of it. She reached into her blazer pocket and produced a small white card, the kind with clean printed text, and she held it out to Layla. My address and my phone number, she said, and my granddaughter's name, so you know who you helped protect. Layla took the card. She looked at it. Beatrice Langston. And below it, in smaller print, Grandma Lily, age 6. She pressed it into her notebook between the last pages. Beatrice reached out and touched Layla's cheek once, gently, and then she straightened her blazer and picked up her rolling carry-on and walked into the terminal with her head exactly level, her pearls catching the light, her silver crown moving through. The crowd with the unhurried certainty of someone who had decided at some altitude over the American Southeast that she was done being quiet. Layla watched her until the crowd closed around her. Then her mother put an arm around her shoulders and they started walking, and that was when the second thing happened. Layla's phone buzzed. She looked at it out of habit, an unfamiliar number with a New York area code. She almost ignored it. Then she saw the name in the contact request that accompanied it. Sophia Ramirez, Chicago Tribune. This is my New York colleague. She would like to speak with your mother. Layla held the phone up to her mother without comment. Vanessa read it. She took the phone from Layla's hand without breaking stride. I'll handle this, she said. I told her to call you, Layla said. Before on the plane. Vanessa looked at her sideways. You gave a journalist my name. I told her you were an attorney and she could find you, Layla said. I didn't give her the number. She figured that out herself. That is technically a distinction. Vanessa said, I am your daughter, Layla said. Vanessa's mouth did the thing it did when she was trying not to smile at something she thought she should be more serious about. She didn't answer the New York number. She saved it and kept walking and said, "We're going to sit down somewhere quiet, and you're going to tell me everything again from the beginning slowly, and I am going to take notes." "I already took notes," Layla said and held up the sunflower notebook. Vanessa looked at it. "Of course you did. They found a coffee shop inside the terminal, one of the quieter ones near the far end of the concourse. Rosalind ordered for all three of them, the particular efficiency of someone who had navigated Layla through many situations and knew that food was a functional requirement before anything else. Vanessa took out her legal pad. Layla opened her notebook. They sat across from each other, and Layla read from her notes while her mother wrote. And for 20 minutes, the world outside that table did not exist. Julian Carver had said goodbye at the gate area, exchanging numbers with Vanessa, promising to make his post-comment section moderated going forward and to remove any identifying speculation if it appeared. He had shaken Layla's hand, which felt formal and right, like an acknowledgement between people who had been through something real together. "He called me the Standard," Layla told her mother partway through the account. In the post, he said, "I'm not a victim. I'm the Standard." Vanessa stopped writing. She looked at her daughter. "He said that about Beatrice," she said. "I know," Layla said. "I thought it was the right thing to say about both of us." Vanessa held her pen still for a moment. "Yeah," she said quietly. "It is." They finished the account. Vanessa read back her notes. Layla confirmed each point. Then Vanessa set the legal pad down and picked up her coffee and looked at her daughter with an expression that Layla recognized as the one her mother wore when she was about to say something she had been thinking about for longer than the conversation had existed. "I want to ask you something." Vanessa said, "Okay." "When you stepped forward on that plane before Rosalind could stop you, what were you thinking about?" Layla had been asked this question before by Beatrice on the plane. She had given the true answer then. She gave the same true answer now. "I was thinking about how everyone else was looking away," she said. "And I thought if I look away too, then there's nobody. And I didn't want there to be nobody." Vanessa was quiet. "Also," Layla added, "I was thinking about you." Vanessa looked up. "You always say that the opposite of injustice isn't justice." Layla said, "It's action. You said it 100 times at the dinner table, on the phone with your clients." "I have it memorized." She paused. "So, I acted." Vanessa Bennett set her coffee down very carefully. She pressed her lips together. She looked at the ceiling for 1 second, and the way she looked at ceilings when she was managing something large and did not want to do it in public. Then she looked back at her daughter and said, "We're going to Nana Pearl's, and you are going to tell this story at the dinner table tonight. The whole thing from the beginning." "Nana Pearl is going to cry," Layla said. "Nana Pearl is absolutely going to cry," Vanessa agreed. "And so might I. And we're going to let it happen." Rosalind, who had been listening from one seat over with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, said nothing. She just smiled at the surface of her drink with the private satisfaction of someone who had watched a child become something larger than the morning had required and was simply glad to have been there. Then Vanessa's phone rang. Not the New York journalist's number, the airline. She answered it on the second ring. Vanessa Bennett. Her voice shifted into the register Layla thought of as armor, smooth and impenetrable and precise. She listened for 30 seconds. Then she said, "I want that report number in writing within the hour, and I want confirmation that the incident has been escalated to your corporate passenger conduct office." She listened again. "Yes, and I want to discuss compensation for Mrs. Langston specifically. She is not my client, but she deserves that conversation." Another pause. "My client is my daughter, and she is 10 years old, and she was a witness to a physical assault that your flight crew took too long to fully act on." A shorter pause. "Good, yes. Thank you." She hung up. "What did they say?" Layla asked. "They're sorry," Vanessa said, which is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of one. "Are you going to sue them?" Vanessa looked at her. "Do you want me to?" Layla thought about it. She thought about Gloria bringing tea without being asked. She thought about the note signed by 7 crew members. She thought about Gloria saying, "I should have moved faster," and Beatrice saying, You moved. No, Layla said, but I want them to do better. Then I'll tell them that, Vanessa said, and I'll make sure they understand that better isn't optional. Layla nodded. She looked at the table. She looked at her notebook at the pages filled with names and dialogue and the 2 lines she had written somewhere over Tennessee that she hadn't shown anyone yet. She pushed it across the table to her mother. Vanessa looked down. She read the 2 lines. Brave isn't the same as not scared. Brave is being scared, and deciding that someone else's nobody matters more than your own comfort. She read the line below it. Nobody is truly nobody as long as one person decides to look. Vanessa looked up. Her eyes were doing the thing Layla had seen Beatrice's eyes do on the plane. Did you write this? Vanessa said. On the plane, Layla said when she was sleeping next to me. Vanessa looked at the lines again for a long moment. Then she closed the notebook carefully and slid it back. Keep that, she said. Keep all of it. They left the coffee shop and walked toward the exit. Rosalind just behind them, the terminal moving around them with its ordinary crowd business. None of the people passing them aware that the girl in the yellow cardigan had spent the morning at cruising altitude, deciding what kind of person she was going to be. Layla's phone buzzed one more time. She looked at it. A notification from a platform she hadn't opened in weeks. Someone had tagged her in something. She opened it. A screenshot of Julian Carver's post reshared by an account with a blue checkmark. A news anchor from one of the Atlanta local affiliates captioned with 4 words, "This happened today," read. Below the reshare, thousands of comments. Layla scrolled through a few of them. She read, "I wish someone had done this for me." She read, "I was on a flight like this once and I looked away. I won't again." She read from someone whose profile picture showed a grandmother and a small child. "My granddaughter is 7. I sent this to her mother." She stopped scrolling. She put the phone in her pocket. "Mom," she said. "Yeah, people are reading it." "I know. A lot of people. I know." They were walking toward the arrivals exit now, the automatic doors ahead, the Atlanta morning beyond them. Layla could smell the outside air already, warm and different from Chicago, fuller somehow green in a way city air is when there's enough of a South in it. "Do you think it's going to change anything?" Layla asked. Vanessa was quiet for a step or two. She didn't give quick answers to real questions. It was one of the things about her mother that Layla valued most, even when it was frustrating to wait. "I think," Vanessa said carefully, "that most big changes start as small moments that someone decided to write down. Someone decided mattered. Someone refused to let become just another quiet thing." She looked at her daughter. "You made this morning a thing that didn't stay quiet. That's not nothing. That might be everything." "But the man is still out there," Layla said. "On another flight eventually." "Yes," Vanessa said, "he is. And there are a lot of men like him." "Yes," Vanessa said. "There are. So, what does one morning change?" Vanessa stopped walking. She turned to face Layla fully right there in the middle of the terminal walkway, the crowds parting around them without comment. And she looked at her daughter with the full weight of everything she knew about how the world worked and how it changed, and how slowly, and how stubbornly, and how it changed anyway. "One morning changes one morning," she said. "And then the next person it changes their morning, and Beatrice goes home to her granddaughter and she tells her a story she has never been able to tell before because this time the ending is different. And Julian Carver posts something that many people read. And some of them remember when they're standing in their own aisle on their own flight with their own calculation to make." She paused. "And my daughter writes 2 lines in a sunflower notebook at cruising altitude that I am going to be reading for the rest of my life." Another pause shorter. "That's what one morning changes." Layla looked at her mother. Then she took her hand, and they walked through the automatic doors into the Atlanta morning. Rosalind just behind them, the warm air meeting them at the threshold. And somewhere across the city, Nana Pearl was making sweet potato pie, and had no idea the girl coming to eat it had spent the morning learning the exact weight of one person deciding to look. And somewhere in this same terminal, Beatrice Langston was walking toward a 6-year-old who did not yet know that the world had people in it who would grab your wrist and tell you that you did not belong, but also did not yet know that the world had people in it who would step into the aisle and tell them to stop. And that was a story worth carrying. Soon after, the airline issued a formal public statement acknowledging the incident and committing to additional crew training on passenger conduct intervention. They offered Beatrice Langston a personal apology issued in writing signed by the regional vice president. They offered compensation. She accepted the apology. She donated the compensation to a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. The man filed no lawsuit. His daughter's text was never answered. Julian Carver's post reached many shares before it stopped being counted. Sophia Ramirez of the Chicago Tribune published a story. She quoted Layla with permission with her mother in the room. The quote ran in the second paragraph. 7 words pulled from the longer conversation. 7 words that had no artifice in them because they had been spoken at 10 years old with nothing to prove. I didn't think about whether it was my place. It ran in the Tribune and then in 24 other papers. And then it traveled the way true things travel, not by being carried, but by being recognized by the people who read it and felt it land in the specific place where they stored the things they had been told about themselves and the things they actually believed. Layla was 11 when she first understood the full size of what the morning had been. Not at the airport, not on the day, but later, sitting at Nana Pearl's kitchen table, reading a letter that had been forwarded through the Tribune to her mother, and then to her from a woman in Houston who wrote, "I am 70 years old. I have been on that plane. I have been in that seat. I have been told to move. No one ever stepped forward. I kept that morning inside me for years. Your daughter gave it somewhere to go." Layla read the letter twice. She folded it and put it in the sunflower notebook behind the card with Beatrice's address and Lily's name. She picked up her pen. She opened to a fresh page. And at the top, in the careful letters she used for things she wanted to keep, she wrote the date. And below the date, she wrote one sentence. The sentence that had been forming since the moment she stepped into the aisle of a first-class cabin with shaking hands and a steady voice, and decided that somebody's nobody was not acceptable. Not today, not while she was standing there. She wrote, "The bravest thing you can do is decide that it is your place." She closed the notebook. She went to help Nana Pearl with the pie. And the morning, which had started as a birthday trip and become something that neither a 10-year-old nor a 72-year-old woman had planned for or expected, settled into the permanent record of small, true things that changed the world, not all at once, but one aisle at a time. One hand held at altitude, one voice speaking into silence and refusing, absolutely refusing to be the last sound in the room.